So you're listening to Cynthia and Josie's Unmentionables, and joining us now we have Rick Westhead, who's a longtime journalist with TSN. And in 2022, Rick, you were actually the one who broke this story about a young woman who had allegations of sexual assault towards certain players on Hockey Canada's junior men's team. I'm curious, like, what was the reaction initially when you broke that story?
Oof. Um, it was massive reaction. This was a case of a young woman who was referred to in court documents as EM, and she said that she had been sexually assaulted. She alleged by eight players who are not named in her lawsuit in 2018 in June. Um, the way that Hockey Canada works in terms of celebrating a championship, the Canadian team that year had won gold in the World Juniors in January, and 6 months later, they had gathered to celebrate. So there was a big golf and gala event in London, Ontario. The players all got special rings, and then after all the official events, the players all went out to party and went to bars in downtown London. And in this case, the young woman alleged that players had sexually assaulted her in their hotel following an evening of dancing and drinking.
And it was, I remember when the story broke, we were all kinda glued to our
Mhm.
our Twitter feeds,
Mhm.
our X feeds at the time, and sort of, like, shocked that this was coming to light because there had been much like many, women refer to the Whisper Network, this was one of those things where there were certain stories and rumors that had been circulating, I think, for a long time,
Mhm.
but it felt like the thing that could not be tackled. And you actually make this parallel, and I find it really interesting, to the Catholic Church as someone who was raised Catholic, and just sort of the ramifications of when I think it was a Boston reporter sort of started to, unearth this whole network of what was happening in the Catholic Church, and the reaction at the time. It was similar in a way. Can you talk about a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So in roughly 25 years ago, the Boston Globe newspaper, they have an investigations team called the Spotlight Team. And so their reporters started reporting stories about how in that city, the church was moving priests around after they'd been accused of sexually assaulting children. So instead of taking the priests to the police and making reports on this, they would quietly move these priests to a new parish where in some cases they reoffended with other children. And it's interesting. The Boston is such a historically devout Catholic city, many Catholics there, and the reaction was profound. There was a prominent cardinal in the city who called for the wrath of God to come down on the media. There were threats of lawsuits against the Boston Globe. Even within the Boston Globe, there was reporters and editors who, were made uncomfortable by this kind of reporting. Another prominent priest, I remember reading stories about the response to these allegations when the Boston Globe went with them. And another priest actually suggested that these children, 12, 13, 14 years old, maybe they were the ones who were seducing the priests and maybe they should be held accountable. So it was a visceral reaction. And I think that there's a fair parallel there because in 2025, you know, people in Canada aren't as religious as they once were, and we see this because churches throughout cities are being converted into condos, right?
Mhm.
And um, but our new religion is hockey,
Mhm.
some a sport that has always been so held in such esteem in Canada. And so I think the same reaction when you start to talk about things like this, about sexual assault and systemic issues, the reflex from people is just to be uncomfortable because we hold hockey to, in a different way than we do so many other sports or pastimes.
How did you decide to write We Breed Lions? What was the moment where you were like, "Yes, this is gonna be the book that I'm gonna write?"
Well, it was a big decision because I don't love writing. I find it really hard. And, all of my spare time went into this. I think I wound up with like 25 drafts of different chapters. Um, but I just thought it was really important to do because we've been here before. we've been here with, scandals and allegations against hockey players. And I really wanted to know, like, why nothing changes.
Mhm.
And the great example of that is in the late 1990s, a hockey player named Sheldon Kennedy, who's now a member of the Order of Canada. He was in the NHL.
Mhm.
He came out publicly with his story of being sexually assaulted more than 300 times by his junior coach, Graham James.
Mhm.
And in the moment, the response was predictable, much like the response after in 2022 when we broke this story on Hockey Canada. Back in the 90s, the federal government promised never again. There was outrage everywhere. Hockey associations across Canada threw up their hands and said, we have to get this right so, more kids aren't hurt. So there were promises of extensive background screening and more transparency when coaches are found to have done bad things. But you know what happened? The news cycle moves fast. People's attention goes to other places. And it wasn't long before all those promises were abandoned.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And, I wonder now whether the same thing's going to happen today.
Mm.
The goal was to help understand and help people understand what hockey in Canada has become. So I wanted to really explain how minor hockey has become an industry. It's
Mhm.
become so commercialized. I walk into rinks in and around Toronto and I see 12-year-old boys carrying $1,200 worth of sticks.
It's
Sticks.
true. It's true. Yeah.
It's hockey, elite hockey has become a rich family's
Mhm.
pursuit. And I wanted to dig into the junior hockey culture. I wanted to understand what it's like for boys who are 14, 15, 16 to leave their family homes, to move hundreds of miles away, to live with a billet family, and to be kind of put into this position where they're joining a team in a locker room where they're playing with men who are 20. Imagine that. Imagine being a 14-year-old and your teammate is 20 and you will do and I've heard this again and again from players I've interviewed. These guys will do anything that's needed to be done to fit in and to not be an outsider. And if that means drinking alcohol to excess repeatedly, no problem. If it means starting to gamble, no problem. If it means vaping, okay. If it means bringing young girls to parties to meet older players, okay. If it means going through these rites of passage and initiations, that happens as well. So, the question that the book, I think it answers a lot of questions, but
Mhm.
one that it raises is, does the way that Canada does junior hockey, does it help to encourage these boys to become the best versions of themselves as they're becoming young men?
Mhm. You interviewed, nearly 60 players and got a whole variety of stories. What kinds of stories surprised you the most?
Good question. I've actually interviewed more than 60 because even since I finished writing the book, I still hear from players.
Mhm.
Um, you know, the trial that we talked about with these the Hockey Canada case, just for people who weren't paying attention to bring them up to speed, there was a 2-month criminal trial where 5 players were charged with sexual assault, and that happened in London, Ontario, and ultimately they were acquitted. The judge in the case ruled that the Crown didn't meet its burden of proof, and moreover, the judge actually said that she believed that there was consent in this case. But even after that trial, I mean, I've been contacted on a regular basis, not daily, but almost daily, by former junior players, by parents who want to talk to me about their experiences. I'm working on a documentary with a company in Quebec called Cineflex that'll come out next year. And a week after that trial finished in July, this past July, we flew to Montreal and interviewed current junior players, 18-year-olds, about what their current stories are and what it looks like. And I can say confidently, in this documentary, you'll see teenagers talk about how these things are still happening today. So,
Mhm.
and I think that's troubling.
I mean, can you break down some of the hazing, I think you've talked
Sure.
about, like, the hazing rituals that seem to be sort of just part and parcel of this experience of being in junior hockey?
Sure. So the hazing, often happens in the locker room, when the coaches aren't around. It can happen on the team bus when the coaches are on the bus. It can happen at rookie parties. And rookie parties typically happen kind of each year within the first couple months of a hockey season starting. And they're purported to be a way for these young players who are new to towns and teams to kind of become accepted, right, by their older teammates. So you'll have games like Find the Water, and that's where there's all kinds of, glasses set up, and there's vodka in many of them, but there's water in some of them too. That's what the young players are told, and they have to keep taking shots until they find the water. Well, the joke is there is no water in any of the shots; it's all vodka. Another ritual called the hot box, and the hot box happens on team buses. And the way it works is, again, the coaches are on the bus, the adults are on the bus, but rookies will get tapped on the shoulder during a road trip, and they'll all have to go. They'll all have to go to the back of the bus, and the veterans on the team will tell them, "Okay, take your clothes all off," and they strip naked. And then the first year players, so imagine 5 or 6, 16-year-olds, they all have to jam together inside the bathroom on that bus. And then somebody will turn the lights off, and somebody will throw some coins through the vent. And the young players are told, well, you can only get out of there after you've collected 350 in change. And the joke is there's only like $1.25 in change.
Right.
So the rookies are in there for as long as these older players want them to be in there. And it's all happening, according to the players I've talked to, with the knowledge and presumably the head nod of their coaches, who are literally sitting 15, 20 rows away.
Is the goal though to like in those hazing rituals, like what would you say that like is the goal to endear, like to test your your commitment to the team? Like I'm trying to think about the motivation,
Humility.
or is it about humiliation? Is it about also then bonding,
Power.
trauma bonding? Like what is the point that they're trying, in your opinion?
Well, it is all about humiliation, isn't it? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, imagine a 20-year-old telling a 16-year-old to take all their clothes off. What is that except humiliation? Um, I think one of the quotes in the book is I think it's from Roy McGregor, a longtime columnist with the Globe and Mail. And he talks about this, and I ask him, and he says that, bonding hockey players, maybe all athletes, maybe people in the military, like this is not only hockey, but we're talking about this in the hockey context. Um, Bonding happens through shared secrets. And so what's happening, everyone knows it's wrong. Otherwise it wouldn't be a secret. But once you've done it, now you're one of the team because you have this secret like everyone else does. Maybe that's a part of it. I'm not sure. I think a lot of it as well is that these, older players on the teams, they went through it. And so if they were humiliated, if they had to do these things, if they had to bring girls to parties to meet older men, then why wouldn't they do the same thing to the new crop of young players coming onto the team as well? Especially like think about how junior hockey looks in Canada. We pay a lot of attention to the NHL, right? We pay modest attention to major junior hockey. So like the Ontario Hockey League, the Western Hockey League, the Quebec Maritime Hockey League, and the teams, for people who don't follow that very closely at that level, are like the London Knights, right? Or the Oshawa Generals. Um, but what about the leagues, even the leagues below that, the tier 2 junior A leagues or junior B or junior C hockey? No one is watching. There is no accountability. So there is only going to be consequences for this type of thing if the teams actually think, yeah, this is wrong, and we're gonna make sure that players are held accountable, because who else is holding them accountable? There's no media watching those leagues.
I mean, I have so many questions, but I guess like how is this unique to hockey? Because I have a boy in baseball. I have a niece who's in an Ivy, and of course there's been history of Bella Kappa, whatever, doing, these rituals. How is this more specifically unique
Hockey
to
problem.
hockey?
I don't know that it is, honestly. I mean, my son played baseball growing up in Toronto, and one of the things I coached him, and we won a provincial championship, and baseball was awesome. And he played hockey as well, and our hockey experience was awesome. So I think it's important to say, there's a lot of great people in the game, and this is not a problem in every locker room, but it's a problem in many.
Yeah.
And that I've documented that through these interviews, and I think it's almost impossible to refute what these players are saying, most of the time putting their own names to this. I guess I'd answer your question about whether, like, what is it about hockey or is it just hockey? Like, it happens in Hollywood, right? Look at
Right.
what happened with Harvey Weinstein. It
Mhm.
happens in gymnastics. Look what happened with Larry Nassar at Michigan State. It happens in football, Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. It happens everywhere. But the thing is, hockey in Canada has such a revered place and status.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't we be looking at this very closely?
Mhm.
Hockey's such a part of our national identity, and it always has been, right? We wrap ourselves in the flag when there's an Olympics and Canada's competing, and whether it's the men's or women's team, we kind of, as a smaller country, many Canadians love the idea that we're better than this game at this game than anybody else in the world. Um, but
Mhm.
at the same time, maybe with that comes a responsibility to make sure it's as safe as it can be for everybody who wants to play.
Yeah.
How so, sorry, how I wanna go back to the idea that there's not a lot of people watching specific levels of hockey, and I can relate to that through friends who have 14-year-olds on these elite hockey teams, and they're playing with 20-year-olds, and they're asked not to go to school on certain days because the 20-year-olds, don't go to school, so the 14-year-olds, there's no one really advocating for these kids. How do we change that? Like, how can that be changed in Canada?
Can I answer your question with a question?
Yes, please.
So, what do your friends who are parents of 14-year-olds, what do they say
Oh,
about their 14-year-olds being told, "Don't go to school today"? Do they
it
put their hand up and say, "No way"?
it is a constant fight between the child and the parent. So they moved the child to a school that's specifically sport related, but they're still not getting the help that they need for the education part of it.
I've done reporting on hockey for so long. I've done reporting on concussions. I've done
Mhm,
reporting on, players in the National Hockey League, and painkillers and addictions. I've reported on players after their careers who are homeless, and it's amazing, like the commitment that families make to hockey.
mhm.
And boy, like if you don't have a long NHL career, how many men out there are in their mid to late 20s and all they've ever done is hockey, right?
Absolutely.
Even from the time they were in elementary school, they were just doing hockey. And if it doesn't work out for them in terms of making a professional career, and the truth is, the vast majority of players don't
Don't make it.
become NHL players,
Mhm,
what are they left with?
mhm.
What is that? Like your subtitle to the book is Confronting Canada's Troubled Hockey Culture. And it's that term hockey culture that you've alluded to a few times. That it has become in this country a kind of religion, and we certainly noticed that when on our show, The Social, my co-host Jess Allen, she stepped into this, hive bee's nest when she happened to mention that she found Canada's hockey culture troubling
Mhm.
in the wake of Don Cherry being fired, and the firestorm that emerged from there was so swift and so shocking to me. We got death threats. We, we had to police were regularly called in. Jess herself was, her job was at risk, because she had upset and ruffled some feathers of, like, uppers in our company. It became a news story where she was like this pariah, and it was one of the most upsetting experiences of my entire television career that has been quite long. And it spoke to something that was so taboo to talk about. I'd never seen anything like this. So what is that?
Why? Yeah,
Why?
why is that?
I mean, in a country where we say that free speech is a foundation, right?
Mhm,
And so, Jess gives her perspective, which is an informed opinion based on her experiences and the things that she's seen, and that's the reaction. It's man, we could spend another hour talking about social media and about, how brutal a place it is, how no accountability exists there because people can make accounts without using their real names, and then,
mhm.
you know, it's amazing. I also cover, and I'm going to do a bit of a left turn here. I also cover the men's national soccer team. We're getting ready for the World Cup next year in Canada, and one of the features that I want to do, so a little bit of a reveal here, but that's okay. One of the pieces we're going to do is on social media. And so I'm asking these professional athletes who are some of the richest paid athletes in the world about social media. And you'd think that in many cases, these guys who are so used to interviews and just kind of lean back, slouching in the chair, and okay, what are you going to ask me about? It's all the same questions. And when I asked them about hate on social media, the
Oh.
response is they were like sitting up and alert and looking at me and wanted to talk about this a lot. And it does strike me how somebody who is anonymous, like think about like a troll in their parents' basement,
Mhm.
and I don't know, 13 or 14-year-old who makes an account and is like poking one of the world's most prominent famous athletes and can get under their skin. It's an
Mhm.
amazingly bizarre phenomenon, right? How
Mhm.
much we all care. So many people are measured by how many followers they have, and that's now how we judge worth.
Mhm.
And I know again I'm off on a bit of a tangent here, but it's such a weird place that we've come.
And you talked about that a little bit in your book. I saw that about how social media has been a part of this whole thing as well.
Yeah, and it is like I've made the choice to back away from it a lot. I'm
Mhm.
not on there very much. I have an account on X, which I was, haven't used for many months, and my publisher for this book said, "Oh, please, like do some book promotion on there." So I
Right.
have, but for the most part, I'm better off not being on there.
Mhm.
I don't care how many followers I have. I don't care what responses are. Like,
Yeah.
What has the hate been like for you? Because, you started off writing this book saying that when you said, "Hey, I'm going to write a book about hockey culture," it wasn't just, let's say parents, it was also coaches that kind of came for you.
yeah, this is like the segment where you guys had me read all the mean tweets people have. Um, no, it hasn't been good. There's a reason that I've backed away.
Mhm.
I have two boys, and one of my boys during COVID had cancer, and so I've had people say bad things and wish bad things on him and just on my family.
Mhm.
I wanted to circle back to the title of your book because I forgot to ask you this. You have a really interesting story about how you came to this title, "We Breed Lions."
Yeah, thanks. Good question. I asked all these players that I interviewed what it means to them to be a junior hockey player. And I got a lot of good answers, but one guy in particular from Ontario, I did 4 or 5 interviews with him, and we just kept fleshing this out. And I'll paraphrase what he said. He talked about how, when you're a junior hockey player, you move away from your family home, you live in a billet home in a new city, often a smaller community, and you instantly become an alpha male there. You
Mhm.
can get into any bar underage. You can skip classes if you want with no accountability. You can talk to any girl at any time, no problem, because you're a hockey player. You learn the rules of the jungle. You learn that rookies eat last after games and shower last after practice and get the back seat in cars all the time. He said that civilians wouldn't understand it. I thought that was an interesting choice of words. He said, when players look around the room in the locker room, they see 20 clones of themselves and they all know they're better than everyone else. And then he closed this thought by saying, you know, this is our culture. We breed lions. And how do you tell a lion to stop being a lion?
I mean, it's just like I think it's important to note you said before you love hockey. Like you have no problem with hockey and we as mom of boys, none of our kids are in hockey, but I have so much empathy. I have empathy for the victims, obviously, 100%.
Mhm.
But I also have a lot of empathy for the way in which these kids are bred. And I know the way that boys come out. They come out the same as anybody else, and they want to be loved and held and felt important. So, to me, this does speak to a very specific kind of, um, coercion and creation. And I'm just wondering, like, do you see any signs of that kind of culture changing?
I do. Yeah, there's a light at the end of this book. This starts very young. One of the things I talk about in the book is on social media, like what are our kids watching, right? When they're 12 and 13 and so impressionable and obviously not fully formed brains, who is connecting with them? Where are they going to learn about the men that they want to become? And the answer is there's not a lot of positivity out there. There's popular podcasts that are not giving messages of, hey, be the best version of yourself, right? There's apparel brands, like one called Hockey Benders, that has a hoodie that says, rippin' wristers, wheelin' sisters. And I've seen that in rinks all across
What does
Toronto.
that mean?
It means you ripping wrist shots and wheeling sisters, like hooking up with girls.
Oh, God.
And again, those are being targeted to boys who aren't even teenagers yet.
Yeah.
So there's a counter to that, and there's a reason for optimism. There are teams that are doing things differently, and I've profiled them in the book. The Peterborough Petes are one. The Kitchener Rangers are another in the OHL. A junior C team in Alliston, Ontario, has got a coach named Travis Chapman, who I wrote a lot about. But one that I really want to mention to you guys is a program in Hamilton. It's called the Hamilton Steel and the Hamilton Huskies, AAA and AA teams. They have 16 teams this year that are involved with a program called Coaching Boys into Men. And so the way this program works, it started in the US. The coaches with that organization in Hamilton, they learn about how to talk to young boys about consent and healthy masculinity. They are partnering with a group called Interval House, a women's shelter in Hamilton. And so you have experts who are coaching the coaches about how to talk about this. And there's, throughout the course of the season, after practices, these hockey coaches are having these conversations with these boys. And I've sat in and I've watched these sessions, and it's amazing. Honestly, it's amazing to watch these men talk to 11, 12, 13-year-olds about consent, about how to
Right.
be the best versions of themselves. And you think about it, where else are they having these conversations?
Exactly.
You guys tell me, are men now who are parents, is this a comfortable conversation for some or many or all dads to have with their boys?
No, no, no.
No, it's not. And so maybe hockey, maybe the kind of the story in the long run could be, imagine if hockey could be a place where kids are having conversations that they're not having at home. And parents should be having these conversations, but let's face it, in many instances they're not.
Yeah.
Right? The conversations should be happening at school. They're not happening at school.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe hockey could be a place where, you could have this group of young men growing up who are learning to be the best versions of themselves. When I dropped my son off at school, at university this fall, the message I left with him was, I expect you to be a protector of women. And what a sport hockey.
That was so nice.
So
I'm
nice.
using that line from my child when he's a little older. I'm using it.
What a sport hockey would be. Imagine if that is the message that coaches are giving these boys.
Yeah.
Imagine if, instead of wearing T-shirts and hoodies that say "rippin' wristers, wheelin' sisters," imagine if young hockey players instead were wearing some sort of a hoodie that talked about how they want to be a leader in their community, how they want to protect women, how they want to protect the vulnerable.
Yeah.
I don't have the tagline for that hoodie yet, but boy,
Work on
wouldn't that
that.
be
We will
amazing?
work on it for you.
We're going to work on that.
I love that. And you know what? That's a wonderful way to end,
Yeah.
because I know that, you've got to go. But
Rick, we
thank
you
you.
so much. The book is called We Breed Lions.
We have it
is
here.
Confronting Canada's Troubled Hockey Culture. And I don't want to hold up this version of it, though. We have the actual hardcover
Okay.
version. Anyway,
Sorry.
we're going to put all the link in the show notes so people can find out how to reach you and how to access the book. Is there anything else you feel like you need to add in before we go?
I'm donating proceeds from this to organizations like the London Abused Women's Centre, the Toronto Rape Crisis Centre, Canadian Tire Jumpstart. So organizations that are fighting gender-based violence and that are also trying to open up sports to kids that don't have opportunities. If you buy a book, they will also benefit from this.
That's great.
Rick, you're
a wonderful
lovely
human being.
Oh my goodness.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Yeah,
taking the time.
thank you
We
so
really
much.
appreciate it.